Yes, this next segment, we want to find various ways that we can connect professional organizations to PMIG or this group and this organization. What some of the organizations within the American Physiological Society and HAPS and so forth have to offer. So our first speaker is Jessica Taylor. She's the Senior Manager for Higher Education Programs at APS, as she just announced to everyone. And she's going to talk to us just for a few minutes about what APS offers in terms of physiology majors and what kinds of programs are there at the office. And it's kind of a nice piece, I think, to pull everything together. Many of these programs we've seen in bits and pieces here and there. She's going to talk about them in total. Jessica?
Thank you. All right. Hi. So yes, I'm Jessica. And before I was a senior manager at APS, I was a classroom educator like you at the undergrad, grad, and med school level. I'm older than I look, but I haven't learned that if you're going to use a lavalier mic, you can't wear a dress. Just saying. All right. So I'd like to kind of take you through a timeline of what APS has had to offer undergraduates in the past, where we currently offer them, and where we see the future direction going with some of our new plans from the strategic plan. And I walk. So initially, APS started providing undergraduate opportunities around 2000, and that was with the onset of the UGSURF program, which is the Undergraduate Summer Research Fellowship. This program is still going on. It went from 12 students to 24 students, and now is probably going back to around 12 students every summer that spend 10 weeks in the laboratory of an APS researcher understanding physiology research. The goal of this program was not necessarily to create more physiologists, but to give the students an appreciation for research and what that means for healthcare professions, as well as career furtherment and how to think like a scientist. The next thing that APS was able to offer was an undergraduate membership. And this started just around 2009, and it was important to the community of APS to offer undergraduate students the opportunity to feel like they had membership and buy-in in the professional society. When the membership started, it was very inexpensive, and it still is. The first year is $10, and then it goes up to $25. So it's very affordable. The next thing that we were able to do, I'm supposed to point like this. The next thing we were able to do was offer the ADI Innovative Educator Award. This is sponsored by AD Instruments. I'm sure many of you use their equipment. And this allows an undergraduate instructor to utilize some of their equipment that's given to them to attend this experimental biology to hopefully further their research. And we actually have an award winner in the room right now. Our current awardee is Anne Corselius, so that's very cool. We were then going to expand the undergraduate research opportunities, and the first one that APS worked with was Step Up, which is here. This was an opportunity through NIDDK at NIH to give undergraduate students from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds the opportunity to go into the lab. And one of the unique portions of this fellowship was that you didn't have to have a research host when you applied. You were matched later. So everyone did not work with a physiologist, but there were a huge number of students that did. And that grant ended a couple of years ago, but made a huge impact in the lives of students who would not ordinarily be able to attain a research position. We further expanded our undergraduate fellowships around 2013, and we added several more programs. We added the IOSP and the STRIDE programs. These are comparative physiology and heart, lung, and blood, respectively, that allow students from diverse backgrounds, that can be racial and ethnic diversity, low socioeconomic status backgrounds, and first-generation college students to once again go into the laboratories of physiologists. We also added what was called the UG-REF program. This was for students who maybe had some opportunities in the lab already, so more than 9 months of experience, and they wanted to further their research, and they were very serious about going to graduate school and pursuing careers as physiologists. And then the last one I want to highlight is the LURAP Award. This is the local undergraduate research award in physiology. Anyone in this room can give it. You send an email to my program coordinator, Allison, and she sends you a package where you honor a physiology student who is presenting at your local poster session here on campus. If you go to the community college, wherever, as long as you're an APS member, you get a certificate, a pen, a t-shirt, and it's really cool, and the students really like it. So that's kind of where APS started. Oh, and I have to say, Jeff and I talked about this when he said he was going to introduce me, but I'm the product of undergraduate physiology research. Not formally, but that's how I got interested in being a physiologist, so it works. So how has APS continued its commitment? So this is the undergrads of APS present. I'm a big fan of literary puns. So we still today continue to have 6 research fellowships. I told you about Step Up, which has technically ended, but we now have Step Up fellows who serve on APS committees, which I think is a very, very cool idea. I told you a little bit about UGSURF and UGREF. So UGSURF here is open to students of any background, and it's highly competitive. We have traditionally given 24 fellowships, and we have over 100 applications for those spots. And the area of physiology is not specific. Then if you've been an UGSURF, or maybe you just got to work in somebody's lab, so maybe I spent a summer with Claudia, and I really love physiology, and I stayed in her lab for the fall semester, and I want to do it again, but I want to be funded because I want to help her out and I want to be able to eat, then I might apply to be an UGREF. And so this was a program that was developed for students who have experience, and we're continuing to fund that one as well. These two are provide funding through APS, so they're not grant supported. So they're, as long as council says yes, we'll keep going. Recently, we expanded to include what we call the HugSurf program, affectionately. So these are UGSurfs, but they're funded by the Hearst Foundation. Now, these students do have to be from a diverse background, and that was a new program, and it started this year, and we funded 2 students through this program. We also, as I said, we have the IOSP. This is a comparative physiology grant that allows students to work in the laboratory. And we've had some very, very interesting projects come out of it. I know Anne mentioned that her colleague Carissa Crane was here last year. So Carissa had an IOSP student who looked at how frogs freezing actually helped them to survive the winter, and how can that research be translated to our soldiers. So that's the IOSP program. And then finally, we have the STRIDE program, and this is through the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And so if you study anything in the vasculature, any kind of respiratory issues, and actually circadian rhythms or sleep, as well as any type of blood disorder, this would be the program for you. So these are continuing. Just to kind of show you the impact, this is where our students have come from. So all across the nation and the world, we've had students from Guam, Hawaii, Alaska, all across the continental U.S., Canada, India, Israel, if you look in the corner. Here, I'll go over here. The United Kingdom, Spain, Puerto Rico, Colombia, really all over the world. And it's been a really great program, and the impacts have been, as you can see, worldwide. We've had, to date, nearly 500 students participate in our undergraduate fellowships. And we don't want to leave out the research hosts. So these are the dedicated APS members that continue to host people over and over. And again, you can see all across the continental US, Guam, Australia, Hawaii, Israel, the United Kingdom, Canada. And if you have hosted an undergraduate student more than 5 times, we honor you. So Jeff Osborne is one of those honorees. We've had people who have hosted undergraduates up to 14 times. So what can APS do in the future? So we recently have undergone a strategic plan, as many of you may know, and we do this about every 5 years, and it's good. It helps us take a stock of what we're doing as a society and how the staff can further support the membership. And so after many discussions, APS will continue to support the fellowship opportunities that I've highlighted here. We will have some smaller numbers, which is okay. We can be more focused on our students, as well as the potential for fundraising to increase the numbers. And of course, the grant-funded ones will continue also. We host a number of undergraduate sessions at Experimental Biology, which is our major meeting each year. And for one of them, that's the APS David Bruce undergraduate poster session. If any of you have had students in it, it's an opportunity for close to 200 undergraduate students to present their posters in a very friendly environment. And you will have everyone from APS presidents to APS council members to other students come up. They speak to them. They talk to them about their work. And it's a very low-key way to teach them how to communicate their science. We also have the undergraduate orientation session. This is a way for students to get a feel of what EB is like. If you are an undergraduate and you attend EB, I know it can be a little overwhelming. I was one of them. I wish they had had this when I was there. We tell them about sessions that are geared toward them. We introduce them to people. We help them kind of get a lay of the land. We teach them how to use the app, although I'm pretty sure they've started to teach us how to use the app. And it's a good time. And we feed them so they like it. And we will continue to offer undergraduate membership and awards. So our membership will stay at a low cost rate to them. Once they transition into being a graduate student, if they choose to, it actually drops back down. and it's only $20, and then the next year it goes up to about $35. So again, it's a very reasonable amount, and we offer a myriad of awards that are beyond the scope of the research fellowship to allow undergraduates to showcase what they do. And we had undergraduates this year who were part of the Horowitz Undergraduate Award Competition, and so they have a time to be judged, very kindly, but still judged, on their research and get to present it to members of the education committee along with other people from the membership. And we had a couple of those students who their research was so well thought of that for their sections, they were actually pulled into some of the training sessions. They gave oral presentations. It's a really nice way to highlight what the undergraduates can do. We will also continue to support PMIG. I am very interested, and the Office of the Education Department is very interested in understanding how we can support you. So we have a list of core medical physiology objectives. If those are interesting to you, if they are useful to you in developing undergraduate physiology objectives, we'd like to help. We have a huge number of professional skills training courses, resources, and other opportunities that might help you and your students develop what they want to. Dee Silverthorn is one of the experts in those, so go talk to her. And if you are interested in what APS can offer your undergraduate students, then please let me know, let an APS member know, let Jeff know, let a member of council like Ron know, and we will continue to try to help you with that. Thank you, and I was told that I am supposed to say I will happily take questions when everybody else is finished. So.
Thank you, Jessica. With that, Jessica covered for me. We're going to hold our questions. If you get some questions and thoughts that you had that you want to ask at the end, when our three speakers have talked about what they have, we'll cover that in a little panel discussion at the end. Next up is Dee Silverthorn. As she said, she's from the University of Texas, Austin, and Dee and I have known each other for most of our careers for a long,
way too many years.
way too many years. Dee is looking for her slides. Dee has been very, very active in HAPS, the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society, for many, many years. And they've embarked on a program where they have an exam committee, which she chairs, and they're developing a common set of exams for physiology. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about that right now.
All right, and I'll start talking without the slides. So in case you haven't ever heard of Human Anatomy and Physiology Society, 30 years ago, it was a group very much like what PMIG is now. In 1987, it was founded by a group of people who were teaching primarily combined anatomy and physiology courses, and primarily at two-year schools and community colleges. And they didn't feel there was a home for them in APS, which was very much a research-focused organization. And they felt a real need to get together because many of the people teaching A&P were not necessarily trained in anatomy and physiology, and many of them only had master's degrees rather than PhDs. So they got together and the organization grew, and it was an all-volunteer organization for 10 years. Where, just like this group, where it was a little bit of support from administration, they did everything. And then at that point, we got a management group, which was somebody to field phone calls and take dues. And then actually it's grown to the point that in 2009, we actually hired our first full-time executive director. So it's a group, I know that they've worked with Monash and gone down and had an international HAPS meeting down in Australia. But one of the things that was very important for them was to develop curriculum resources, because what they discovered getting together, there were no guidelines whatsoever for anatomy and the combined A&P courses. And so very shortly after they started, they came up with course guidelines and what they call learning goals for introductory A&P. And you'll find hapsweb.org is the URL, and you can find a lot of these there online. And then shortly after that, they said, well, we really need some sort of standardized exam because we can't tell. Many times at a community college, you've got 7 or 8 people who are teaching the course, and are they all equivalent? And so both states and institutions were looking for some sort of standard exam that they could give and have some idea. So they started with the Comprehensive Anatomy and Physiology exam, and it's been developing over the years, and it is currently now gone through all the psychometrics and has been validated and is being used, and there are 2 versions of it. And as the organization has grown, more and more people have come in from 4-year schools and universities. And so people have been saying, but we don't teach combined A&P, we teach anatomy only or physiology only. So they have come up now with an anatomy and physiology, and we're working on physiology. We also have put out position statements on animal use in laboratories, on cadaver use, distributed learning, and one of my pet projects is accreditation, because particularly if you're in the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, SACS, we have had people fired from teaching physiology because consultants said, I'm sorry, you've got a degree in veterinary physiology. Humans aren't animals, so you're not qualified to teach physiology. In 2018, they actually came up with a set of anatomy-only learning outcomes, and they're actually working right now on the anatomy exam. And what I am here for today is to get help, because we are working on a set of physiology-only learning outcomes. So this would be for someone who has taken a 1 semester, maybe 1 year course, so it's not for the major, it would simply be broadly applicable. And to have some sort of standardized instrument where the institution or the professor could really tell. And this is where we're headed with this. So the first step is to create a set of learning outcomes for this. And to do that, what we're doing is we're starting with 2 sets that have already been developed. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, it won't show up on the screen. That's right. I remember. The HAPS has come up with learning outcomes. They tend, because they were developed initially for community college, they tend to be a little bit lower level and maybe not as detailed. So we're also working with the APS document, which was developed along with the ACDP, the Association of Chairs of Departments of Physiology, that are called the Medical Physiology Learning Objectives. And so we're taking those, we're doing a first pass triage to get rid of the really high level, complicated ones. And I am looking for volunteers to help go through this, and I have some already in this room, who will take a system, and then we're looking, once we have people that have done that, we'll have them run through some beta tests. And then at that point, the goal is to create an exam and have the exam go through the psychometrics and be validated. We have physiology questions only. I was on the combined A&P writing group, and so there's some questions, though, that we have to answer. So here's our timeline. Draft of learning outcomes we'll start in September and hope to have them done by the end of the fall, at which point we'd like to be able to send them to other volunteers that didn't necessarily want to work on them, but maybe are willing to read through them and say, hey, you're missing X, Y, and Z for my program. And then the goal is, and this is part of the discussion I hope we'll have here, we'd like to have the test concepts and skills rather than just the memorization. And I underline trivial because I learned the hard way that students, if you tell them we're teaching you concepts, then they go, but I thought you said we weren't going to have to memorize anything. You know, you've got to memorize something, but picking the important things, the important content that they have to know that's related to the concepts, and then to be able to apply the concepts. And so one of the questions to be asked is for a an introductory course is how much of the exam should be that recognition of key information, of key facts and the application, and then how much of it should be the extension and the ability to transfer understanding of the concepts to solve new problems. And so what would the balance be for that for a good test? And I'm going to be really short. There's my email, and we might actually partially get back on schedule.
Thanks much, Dee. I think this is a real critical piece that this group could be instrumental in working with HAPS jointly to develop this assessment and develop these pieces, and it's going to help everybody. And I think that's why we're all here is for all of us to work together jointly. Our next speaker is our host, Nick Delamere, and I'm happy to have Nick here. Nick is chair of as he said, chair of physiology department at the University of Arizona, and an active member of ACDP, the chairs of the departments of physiology, Association of Chairs of Departments of Physiology. And I'm going to echo Ron Lynch's comments. I just wrote a PCOP blog about the changing landscape of physiology education and how I like to term it that I think in some ways it's the American version of morphing into the European system of medical education, which means that we're pushing the learning of content and information further and further down the pipeline to the undergraduate levels. And I think that this group, PMIG, as we grow within the American Physiological Society, is going to need to work very closely with ACDP and the chairs of the departments of physiology. And as Erica said earlier, they're very, very interested in this organization and how we can all work together to promote physiology education that makes their lives more effective at the medical physiology level. So, Nick.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you guys. I put a squid up there. Because I actually started my PhD thesis working on the lens of squid. But the reason I'm putting the squid up there is obvious to you guys. Well, it may become obvious. Let's get there. So I've thought a lot lately, and I've talked a lot about homeostasis. And when I'm not talking to physiologists, I talk about coping. And I talk about coping at all different levels. I talk about coping. I look out when I teach my undergraduate students, and I know how difficult it is for them to cope. To get to the class was huge. To get to university was huge. To pay for it, to get into a lecture was amazingly difficult. To get to be a faculty member is incredibly difficult and testing. To just survive in this world is really difficult. And so you can cope at the cellular level, you can cope at the organ level, you can cope at the personal level, you can cope at the faculty level, you can cope at the department level. This is where I'm getting to. You can cope at the university level, you can cope at the discipline level. So it's about coping. And I'm interested in how animals cope too. And I've become fascinated by how this creature copes. This is the narwhal. And the narwhal eats the squid. So the squid and the narwhal are sort of involved in some coping, homeostasis, steady state level. Need enough squid, get enough narwhal, etc. So the narwhal is a mammal, it's a cetacean, it lives up in the northern waters, it hunts squid, it loves halibut too. Amazing creatures. So these are creatures that are living in icy waters. They maintain a steady state body temperature 30 plus degrees. There was a really nice study about people who, it's difficult to measure the temperature, but somebody encapsulated sensors that they could swallow, got them to swallow it. And they were measuring the temperature in the stomach and finding that when they fed, the temperature in the stomach dropped down to 32, 34, and then rose again as the contents warmed after they'd eaten a frozen or a cold squid. They can dive to nearly a mile. They dive over 5,000 feet. They collapse the lungs when they dive. They tremendously adapted because they don't want to suffer from the bends as they come up. So they collapse the lungs. They've got the highest content of myoglobin of any mammal that we know. They live for an average of 90 plus years. The oldest one that was dated was 114 years. It was dated because of the lens of the eye. And that's what I work on, the lens of the eye. They analyzed the lens of the eye and could figure out the age of the proteins. The proteins were there since the animal was born. They worked out. So this animal copes really, really well in a very harsh environment. It's adapted. One of the other things about them, they live in pods. They live in groups, 15 to 20 animals, okay? So why do they live in pods, okay? Do they live, oh, you can do this. Does anybody go for number one? The pods facilitate hunting. Anybody? Any takers? Yeah? Builds a sense of community. Any takers? Safety in numbers. Is it safety in numbers? The experienced animals teach the younger animals. Or all of the above. Come on, guys. If it's not all of the above. So, it's all of the above, okay? This is my pod of department chairs. This is my pod of department chairs, the ACDP. And it is for all of the above. It really is. It's all of the above. It facilitates hunting. We, as a group, can push for things that as individuals we could get brushed off on. It builds a sense of community. We're very nervous, anxious creatures. And we don't have a community here because everybody else wants to eat our squid on the campus. So we gather together, and safety in numbers. The experienced department chairs take care of the new department chairs. All of the above. So what we've done is it's an unusual group, but I think when you think about this group, it's probably something to resonate with these four things, or all of the above, and your group. You might want to think about why you all seem to know that it was good to come as a group, but you might want to think about it. And I think you might want to look at the novel. So, okay. On the role of the ACDP. So, we've come together for all those other reasons, really because we're safe and we feel less anxious and so forth. But there are various things that are happening, and we are each individually trying to work our departments through things. And I think some of those things are relevant to this group. So one of them was this migration of the medical curriculum out of the hands of departments and its impact on our ecosystem. And another of them that I want to touch on at the end of this is what physiology educators want from the departments, what you guys want from us, and vice versa. So let's come back to the first one of those. So the narwhal lives, it needs to breathe the air, but it hunts under the ice. So it's very dependent upon the physical structure of the ice, and it lives actually in these leads, which are sort of cracks in the ice of various dimensions. And they can swim great lengths, and we don't know how they figure out where the next lead is, because if they come up and it's just ice, they're not They're not going to live. But we know they live because they live to 90 plus years. But their ecosystem is changing. Our ecosystem is changing. And our ecosystem is going through its own version of the narwhal's climate change problem. So it was the migration of the medical school curriculum out of the hands of physiology departments had a huge change. In fact, many of our number disappeared on this. So many physiology departments failed because people said, well, I don't have a physiology course. Why do I need a physiology department? So it sent shivers through people in the discipline, and the ACDP members would meet each December and there'd be an empty chair because somebody'd gone, because the department had gone. And so the ACDP was trying to figure out, well, if we don't teach physiology in the medical school, what are we there for? Dean's asking me why I have you. And I was, well, you know, it's a complicated question. There was no easy answer. But it also is what Ron just said. There was something going on in the medical school, which where they were saying, we're going to teach our curriculum without a physiology course. So where does the physiology go? Some of the curriculum space, the number of years to teach basic science, is diminished so much that physiology's probably gone to somewhere else. It might have gone to before you get to medical school. And that's an issue. So the chairs want to know that. Do they, and in fact, our medical school has now, Zoe's on the admissions committee with one of the criteria now is you have to have physiology or equivalent to be a qualified applicant. So it's being put down to the need to teach this at the undergraduate level or the need to teach this somewhere else. And this sort of flops into the table in front of you guys. So, I don't know what the role for the ACDP is, and I don't want to specify it. I think it would be better for you guys if you specified it and asked us. I think you guys need to sort of go out and say, we're a vocal group, we're the power, we're the ones who are doing this. This is what you need to do. There are just two or three words that come to mind. One is economics. I live in a world of the economics of education. We've got to pay for things, and we've got to tell the president that it's worthwhile having a physiology group as part of our university. He doesn't need one. What value do we give? So value is another word. What value do we give? And I think that's something, what value does a program give? What value do the faculty members give? I think that I've heard all the conversation has been on point so far, but the one thing I didn't hear about this group's goals for what it does is you guys, in order to cope, need a firm appointment. You need somebody to guarantee that you can come in and teach and you can function on your discipline, but you have a confidence that you're going to get a salary next year. You're going to and you need to speak with a voice that people who teach physiology need a fair deal. And I think that the people at the ACDP are some of those people who need to hear that the people in physiology teaching need a fair deal. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Thank you, Nick. Now we'll, if we could have our three speakers available. If we've got a few minutes that we'll take some questions and to discuss these people's talks. Lisa?
So first thing I have is a comment, is that this past EB, I brought one of my students and he competed in the Horowitz competition, and he actually did a project, my student did a project on teaching in very helpful. about now? No.
Okay. And I just want to say this is something, if you have a student, this is something you want them to do, because he got fabulous feedback. He had a joyous time explaining his project. He went to the undergraduate orientation, absolutely loved it. And, this is a kid from a small town in Minnesota that, this was just such a wonderful experience and opportunity for him. And I'm so glad that I brought him so that he could do that. So I totally recommend that you get your students involved in that. The other thing that I would, maybe my question for Nick and others, is that at Minnesota, we've had a very interesting situation. So we have a physiology major in a medical school, but we have, our department is in the medical school. Our chair is Joe Metzger. And we also have an undergraduate major in the College of Liberal Arts. And our major was it in the 20s? Was developed? So since 1920, we've had a physiology major. It was in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and then it split into liberal art. We went to liberal arts instead of going to science and engineering. And then there's something called the College of Biological Sciences. And there's a dean there that basically says that if you teach medical students, you are not qualified to teach undergraduates. And it's been, it's caused some contention. Sometimes not. I thought it was interesting. I was at the ITL last week, and one of the faculty was talking about what are barriers students have, and we were saying, oh, well, they have to work 14 jobs, and they're first generation, and yada yada yada. And she said, isn't that interesting that all the problems are about the students? And it's like we're not one of the barriers. And then we talked about, what are we doing for students? And then Nick said, you guys didn't say anything about having an appointment where you are secure so you can do your teaching and do your scholarship. So I know that's a big mishmash of things, but some of the things that came to mind as folks were talking.
Would you like to talk about that, Nick?
I'll pick something out of that, and I'll pick this. Somebody's not qualified to teach undergraduates or what have you. There's a lot sitting in that comment about, well, what does make one qualified to do it. Sometimes you can actually tell if somebody's really engaged as undergraduates. Some faculty members are better at certain things than others, and I think it's always better if they're allowed to focus and emphasize and work in the area that they're good at. Look, there's a huge opportunity for misunderstanding between a dean of a medical school or a dean of anything and what goes on the shop floor. And I think at universities, we're always trying to educate our dean about what really goes on and what our real needs are. In the medical school, and my department is in the College of Medicine, and we teach undergraduates. On the dials on the dean's dashboard, we're a little dial at the bottom left, and we're sort of in the shade. We're not the biggest thing on his mind, and I think that this comes down to, well, why not? Well, maybe we didn't tell him enough or her enough what we do. I think one has to represent to the university the value that you add to the university. That's always going to be a fixed pot of money. It's a zero-sum game. So if we give money to physiology, we're not giving it to architecture, for instance. I think one has to say, what's our value? Why do we merit this? And it gets wrapped up in lots of the conversation items today, which is how well our students do, what are our students' needs, and what kind of job we're doing in training the young people.
And while you're taking there's another key piece that I know that I face in dealing with it. I'm in a College of Arts and Sciences, and with Kentucky, we have a physiology department in the College of Medicine. So if we develop a physiology major in the College of Arts and Sciences, that means dollars are going to flow from, it's going to be removed from the College of Medicine dean over to the College of Arts and Sciences dean, and vice versa in both directions. So it becomes a very complex picture. I know it. I've always thought about the poor chair of physiology at Michigan State who reports to 4 different deans, or sorry, might be up to 40 by this. It was 4 25, 30 years ago. It might have increased. So it becomes a very complex picture, and we all have to, and as Nick correctly states, it's a zero-sum game. I mean, we can't manufacture money, so we have to make sure we're in that. Ann?
So I guess one question, when we look at the directions many of our students are going, medicine occupies a big chunk of that. And I kind of a question for Nick about the physiology chairs, but then a comment. The question being, how many of those departments are also serving, physician assistant type programs? Because what I find a difficulty sometimes is perhaps promoting the relevance of physiology in some of the more allied health programs where, it's not like a medical school where a physiologist is teaching their physiology curriculum. All of that education is being delivered by a PA or by PTs. And so I think that makes it challenging for the undergraduate student to see the value of physiology in the specific future disciplines that maybe even if it is a prerequisite, there aren't physiologists working in the Department of Physical Therapy. So I guess as we think about what people to partner with or the stakeholders, obviously medical schools and the medical curriculums are a big chunk of that. But as we saw on the data presented, some of those other allied healths are as well. And I feel like the educational model of the allied health differs from medical schools in terms of the role of a physiologist in providing the physiology education. So I don't know if you can kind of comment on the makeup of your other chairs a bit.
So I think that the other chairs at the ACDP are as lost as I am on this issue. And I think our program is lost on this issue, and I actually think everybody in the room, if they are honest with themselves, are slightly lost. What do people do with physiology? I mean, we're all enthusiasts. So everybody here was really excited about the narwhal and claps in his lungs, and this is really cool. But what good is that going to know? Knowing the narwhal claps in its lungs, what good does it do you? The ACDP has had, I think for about 4 years now, it's been having workshops on undergraduate physiology because it saw it coming as a growing piece of work. It saw physiology training moving out of medical schools into the undergraduate campus. So it felt it had to look at that. And that's really why Erica came down and a couple of years ago, and we started to talk about, well, what do people do with this? And one of the big fallacies, and I think some of the chairs at the ACDP had to reset the mind. It's not about training medical school applicants. It's more than that. The medical school, in our medical school here, we have 120 slots maybe. We have over 10,000 applicants. So you can't fit that many students down the funnel. So most of the students are going to not do medical school. And are we training those in an appropriate way? This is the conversation at ACDP. It's the conversation in our university, and I think I hear it being a conversation here.
Wanted to share some thoughts about the role of our department chair in our department at UBC. And one's relating to economics and one's relating to how physiology permeates a medical school, 2 issues that I've heard today. One thing that our foundational medical science department chairs within the Faculty of Medicine did was make sure that they pinned the dean down on a formalized document so that bums and seats meant dollars to to the department, and it was very, very difficult to do it. So with 300 majors, which is our number we're shooting for initially, it would mean almost $2 million to our department formally through that agreement. 2,000 students, it would be mind-blowing what would happen there. So this is something that was very important for us. Second of all, in our medical curriculum, all the courses and all of the sessions have a foundational science and a clinician co-owning and co-defining the learning objectives around them. Clinicians do the very clinical things. Foundational sciences tend toward the more foundational things, but they both have a stake in that learning outcome. And department heads have to vet the teaching and who's assigned to the teaching. So our department head ensures that our physiologists and the DNA from that department is woven through 4 years of our undergraduate program. So those are two things that our department head has really been instrumental in ensuring that we're maintaining. And I think that the distributed nature of physiology within medicine, and physiology as we see it permeating many, many different disciplines here, I think that's just the new reality. Before, physiology was the core group of faculty members who defined it in our school, and now it's a discipline into and of itself. And I think we're all just getting used to this new distributed kind of ownership. So, interesting.
Jenny was next, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, because I think as we construct value propositions for education, we have to have a value. What's the value of a physiology degree? And I tell my students, this is an education, not a training program. We're 0 for 2 for engineers in my family. My brother and I both got engineering degrees. They were incredibly valuable. I ended up a physiologist. He, ended up a pilot. It doesn't mean that our faculty failed us. When you look at STEM writ large, most mathematicians don't have job titles that start with a mathematician. Most biologists, 10 years later, they're not doing biology. But it is an education, not a training program, and there's value in that, but we have to look at that value proposition. Most of our undergraduates aren't going to go on to medical school. Most of our postdocs aren't going to go on to R1 faculty careers. This is the landscape we live in, and we should own up to it and create a value proposition that reflects the true value and not this mythological value.
So I'd like to just talk about something a little bit, I think, a larger, that involves all of us, and that is who owns physiology as a discipline. And, historically it was medical school physiology departments. Every dean in the College of Medicine wants to have a basic medical science department and get rid of physiology, get rid of biochemistry. And physiology, that's where we have resided. Biochemistry has resided on main campus for the most part, right? So, I think there's huge opportunity for us here in this room to take advantage of that, because the curriculum is moving, and it's moving to the undergraduate level. So, at the University of Arizona, we have the medical school right next door, and we have a physiology department that owns the discipline of physiology. We might become a basic medical science department, but this is where physiology is going to be taught, right? We're going to be here. Now, where I think the issue comes in, or I think the great opportunity comes, is what happens at the University of Scranton when the medical schools say, or any of the professional schools say, you need to have physiology before you enter. What do they do to get that if they're at the University of Scranton? Are you going to have a pharmacology class and a physiology class and an immunobiology class and no. So are the students going to have to go to the University of Arizona or Michigan State for a sabbatical year or 6 months? And are they going to take the same curriculum that we're offering our 4-year students to do that? So the opportunity is huge. And I think you really need to think about how these different students get taught, how we integrate, not just at the University of Arizona with 2,000 physiology students, but at the University of Scranton, which has maybe 10 or 15 students that want to go to medical school or be physician assistants, what they need and how they're going to get their undergraduate prerequisites for.
We're running out of time. That's it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll have Jenny start her presentation at 2:45.